Nivelle. Nivelle believed that an improved combination of continuous artillery bombardment and rapid infantry advance could rupture the German line. Nivelle decided to try out his theory in the rolling countryside of Chemin des Dames. His plan included a supporting attack by the British at Arras, which would start a week earlier and draw off German reserves. On the 9th of April 1917, the British attacked.
Tomorrow morning, early, we go over the top and hope to give the Boche hell. I have every confidence in my battalion. They will fight to the finish if necessary. I told them that there was only one good Boche, and that was at Dieppe. If only we could give the Hun a real good licking, I think he will be inclined to cave in.
The beginning of Arras was a pretty successful British attack. The Canadians took Vimy Ridge, and further south, some British divisions carried out the longest single advance in any day of trench warfare up to that point, about 3.5 miles.
But the British had not yet learned to follow up such a breakthrough quickly, and Arras turned into a month-long battle of attrition. Now it was the French army's turn at Chemin des Dames. But Nivelle's plan was flawed. For a start, he was careless about security, and the Germans got to hear of the operation. In addition, the German army was already withdrawing to its new defensive positions. This meant much of the ground Nivelle planned to take was now his anyway, and the new German line was immensely strong and overlooked the positions in which the French infantry and artillery would form up for their assault. On the 16th of April, the French attacked.
How we advance, how we get through, how we are not blown to pieces at every step, nobody knows. We stumble on, explosions everywhere. We fall flat, get up again, it's raining, we are swimming in mud. But we go forward in a hurry to escape this furnace, to get there at last, to find perhaps, worse still, it's impossible to get through this zone unarmed.
In one night, more cannon shells were fired than in any of Napoleon's campaigns. These men, exhausted, poorly fed, stuck in the muddy trenches, took the order to attack, grumbling to themselves, "Not everybody can be a hero."
The Germans had changed the pattern of defense. They left the front of the line relatively open, but behind, held in reserve, was their new idea. Stormtroopers waiting to go on the counterattack just as the French foot soldiers were reaching exhaustion. By the 5th day of Chemin des Dames, the stormtroopers had inflicted 130,000 casualties on the French.
The French army had already suffered the whole of the Battle of Verdun. Virtually every French soldier at some point had been put through the mill at Verdun. And then fairly soon afterwards, Robert Nivelle had come up with this wonderful offensive, the big Nivelle offensive, which was going to end the war in a hurry, which turned out to be an equally costly disaster. And the French soldiers had just had enough.
French soldiers began to mutiny.
Throughout the region, there is talk of nothing but mutinies, of troops refusing to relieve their comrades. It often happens that troops in the lines spend 3 or 4 days longer there because their replacements refuse to march.
The French mutiny did not bring violence against their officers or even a collapse in order. It was simply that the ordinary soldier was no longer willing to go on any more sacrificial advances. Robert Nivelle was sacked and replaced by the savior of Verdun, Henri Pétain.
Pétain was brought in to sort out the mutinies by a combination of strict discipline, some executions, and also some decent caring for the soldiers, giving way to some of their demands. He brought the French army round.
Even so, the French army would launch no major attacks on the Western Front for a full year, staying mainly on the defensive. Pétain was concerned that the Germans would take advantage of the French collapse in morale, although inexplicably they failed to detect it. But it was now only the British who could take up the offensive. Haig planned a major attack for June at Messines Ridge, a stretch of high ground which commanded miles of countryside. He assigned Herbert Plumer, a very modern general, to devise the operation. Junior officers realized they were being led by someone who really knew his business.
Nothing was left to chance. We even had a large-scale model covering about an acre, which represented to scale the woods and the villages beyond. This latter was a triumph of skill. It looked like a huge toy village and would have delighted the children.
The Messines Ridge attack combined British, Australian and New Zealand troops. A potentially devastating weapon, the mine, laid by tunnellers, would be used en masse for the first time.
The tunnellers had possibly the worst job of all on the Western Front. Digging these narrow passages under the enemy lines in order to blow them sky high was a frightening business, because you knew the enemy was almost always... Digging these narrow passages under the enemy lines in order to blow them sky high was a frightening business, because you knew the enemy was almost always doing the same thing too.
The ordinary perils of mining under such conditions and with inadequate equipment would be quite enough for the ordinary man. But the tunneler had to face the opposition of the enemy as well as nature. A chance shell on the mouth of the shaft might arrest the flow of precious air, or mean condemnation to an indescribable death in a living tomb. More exciting, if no less unpleasant, was the prospect of running into an enemy gallery. The bravest men have confessed to nervous fears as they have crouched in a dugout, listening to the monotonous tapping of enemy miners below. So long as the tapping continued, there was safety. It was the occasional silences that were terrifying. Then the enemy might be charging his mine. At any moment might come death in its most horrible form.
On the 7th of June, 19 mines were ready to prime under Messines Ridge.
Dawn had not yet broken. The night was very still. The minute hand on my watch crept on to the fatal moment. Then, out of the silence and the darkness, along the front, 20 mines, some of them having waited 2 years or more for this occasion, containing hundreds of tons of high explosives almost simultaneously and with a roar to wake the dead, burst into the sky with great sheets of flame developing into mountainous clouds of dust and earth and trees.
Silhouetted against the flame, I saw huge blocks of earth that seemed to be as big as houses falling back on the ground. I saw a man flung out from behind a huge block of debris silhouetted against the sheet of flame. Presumably some poor devil of the Boche. It was awful, a sort of inferno.
The British retook Messines Ridge and the commanding position it offered. The explosions were heard as far away as southeast England. At the end of July 1917, after their success at Messines Ridge, the British launched the Third Battle of Ypres, which would lead to Passchendaele. For 15 days, the German line was pounded.
With horror, you feel that your whole being, mental and physical, has lost all meaning. After all, the lump of metal that would crush you to a shapeless nothing may have started on its course.
The British went over the top on the 31st of July.
If only you could be here tonight, how you would enjoy it. Altogether, it should be great fun, as long as it doesn't rain.
But it did rain.
These were some of the most appalling conditions that soldiers had to fight in during the First World War. and historians have endlessly debated whether Haig was right to carry on fighting under these conditions. I suspect it's a case of Haig being damned if he did and damned if he didn't.
2 poor devils of 123rd Brigade have been found drowned, or rather suffocated. They must have been stuck in the mud, become exhausted, and fallen face forward.
Our boys are having a terrible time in the trenches, up to the waist in mud, just like a ditch full of water. There are dead horses, men, cars, motor lorries in the hundreds. It is death to go off the road as the mud is so deep. The sun was bad enough, but this is 1,000 times worse.
My 90th birthday, I was in the trenches in front of Passchendaele. The Germans at Passchendaele were higher up than us. They could look down on us. And there was a 3-day barrage on the trenches. They blew them all to hell. And when the Yorks and Lanks went over, expecting just a few Germans there, and were going to take Passchendaele, the Germans came up out of their dugouts, a couple of machine guns, woof, they were gone. The attack was called off. It was a disaster.
Poor little Shorty. He used to tell me about his young lady, his Hilda, about his home he had already bought. And when he got home, he would get married and come over to see me and introduce her to you. How he loved his Hilda, but unfortunately he'll never see her again. Poor fellow. He would give me half of everything he had. It's a lovely thing, his friendship out here. Please God, it won't be long before this war's over. We're pushing old Fritz back. I don't think he'll stand the British boys much longer, and then we'll try and keep a nice home. I'll know the value of one now. Good night, love. God bless you and my children, and may he soon send me back to those I love, is the wish of your faithful husband, Jack.
Jack Mudd died 4 days later. For some soldiers, the killing had gone on too long.
As that German came towards me, and I can't kill him, I mustn't kill him. I can remember when I joined the army, I swore I would serve my king and country. And by some means or another, it flashed in my mind when Moses came down off Mount Sinai, the 6th commandment he brought down, thou shalt not kill. And I can't kill him. I had about 5 seconds to make my mind up. I shot him above the ankle and above the knee. I brought him down. I didn't kill him.
Just 41 square miles were captured in 15 weeks. Each square mile cost some 10,000 casualties. But the British had also taken a huge toll of Germans.
At the end of the Battle of Passchendaele in the first week of November 1917, I think any observer could have been forgiven for thinking that both sides were played out, that they had nothing left to give.
But there was a twist. A new weapon the Allies had been experimenting with for a year, the tank. Within a fortnight of the end of Passchendaele, the tank brought a dazzling victory at the Battle of Cambrai.
The British used tanks on a large scale for the first time, and just as importantly, they used predicted artillery fire. Now what this means is that they were able to start firing without firing a few shots to begin with to find out where the shells would land, and thus they were able to achieve surprise.
There was no preliminary bombardment to warn the Germans of their danger. The enemy infantry panicked and fled from the massive war machines, or streamed down the slopes towards the British line to surrender. We watched the scene, fascinated. Our tanks were now advancing. There they were, lumbering along, picking their way through the honeycomb of shell holes and craters, sometimes defeated, but generally in the end, winning their way through this area of devastation.
Tonight, I may sleep and dream of you where a Boche officer never dreamt of the trouble awaiting him at dawn. Think of the hundreds of tanks. Think of the hundreds of guns, all got up quietly and secretly. I can't get over the wonder of it.
11,000 Germans were taken prisoner. Cambrai was a complete success. Church bells were rung all over England in celebration. But to many soldiers at the front, it seemed an isolated victory. Though British morale would never break, it was at its lowest point.
The war is getting more and more desperate. On every hand one sees unrest and dissatisfaction rampant, and nothing sensible done to ameliorate grievances.
A more miserable existence would be hard to imagine. There's nothing but unrest and uncertainty, and everyone here is absolutely fed up to the teeth.
1918 loomed. The war on the Western Front hung in the balance.